It's the Fightful MMA Holy Smokes podcast with Showdown Joe and Sean Ross Sapp.
What's up, everybody? May 16th edition of the Holy Smokes podcast with yours truly, Joe Ferraro. You can follow me online anytime via social media at Showdown Joe, and you can follow my co-host with the glorious hair today. You get to see him the whole 60, 70, 80, 90 minutes. The infamous Sean Ross Sapp. Sean, what's going on, brother?
The people asked for more hair. I gave them more hair. I'm
doing
growing this out. I'm growing it out.
Under what pretense? What are you trying to be? Just your own dude?
Maybe I just want to do something special. Maybe I'm trying to do something nice. In which you all might find out about probably early 2018.
Are you giving us a hint at something?
Maybe.
Can you tell us?
I'll just say this. Elias Theodorou ain't got shit on me.
Are you going after Per Plus?
Oh, no. That's his. I'm not going to... Listen, I like Elias. Elias is a good dude. I may grow out my hair and have more beautiful hair than him, but I'm not going to take a stream of revenue from him because I know that Pert's going to be dialing my number. Pert, it's the same number I've had since 2006. You know where to get a hold of me.
Oh my God! Listen, so much to discuss in the world of mixed martial arts. I don't even know where to begin because UFC 211. We discussed it in the post-show podcast. That was a fantastic podcast, by the way. For those that missed it, you can still catch it online. Go to FightfulMMA.com. It's there. We discussed so many different things. Some stories have now emanated out of there that Sean and I will discuss today. There's a few different things, not from UFC 211, that I do want to touch on, Sean, because earlier on, before you and I went live here, we were talking, we're doing some stuff, and I want to show you something. I simply cannot find where I put it. I'm one of those guys. You tell me if you're one of these guys that when you get a business card from someone that you just met, when you're networking, you keep it, you know it's important, and you put it somewhere safe to make sure that whenever you need it, you have access to it. I did that. I have no idea where it is.
Well, what business card was it?
Okay. Have you read up on the stories about Anthony Johnson and Anthony Johnson's new business venture? It is going to be in the medicinal marijuana category.
Yeah, we ran a story about that on Fightful.com this week, actually.
All right. Well, in that case there, the party that he'll be doing business with, he said he's got a friend up in Canada. Well, I know this friend quite well, and I ran into him at UFC 210 in Buffalo. And he told me about what he's doing, and he gave me his card because obviously it's something that I'm interested in when it comes to investing my money and knowing where to put it and following things. And I want to say, hey, that guy that Anthony was talking about, I want to show you the card, Sean, and I don't know where that card is, but I'm going to find it. As soon as we're done here, I'm going to find it.
Is it anybody I know?
No, definitely not.
I'm interested. I'm very interested.
Ian McCall basically gave some advice via MMA Junkie. He said, if Anthony plans on doing this, you better get a lawyer. You better get a lawyer because the laws change so quickly, and one wrong mistake and you'll end up in prison. I think that's sound advice if you're asking me.
Oh, yeah, it's very good advice. And Ian McCall is hit or miss when it comes to advice because he's had his own troubles and he's said some things that weren't necessarily true. But yeah, I agree with him. I agree with him in that regard. You got to do that when you're getting into business, especially because he could make six figures per fight still if he wanted to.
But he also stated in this interview that he did with Booker T, Anthony Rumble Johnson, that is, he stated that he was never a fighter. Fighting wasn't for him. He didn't want to do it, never wanted to do it. He was just so athletic that it was natural for him to excel at something like this. He says, I'm done taking, and this is what you and I talked about after that event, UFC 210, and we talked about it all week after that he's not a guy that wants to take that head trauma anymore. He doesn't want to take any more brain damage, although he did make a quote that kind of insulted me. He's like, I want to be able to, one day have kids and be able to talk to my kids when I'm 45. And I'm like, I'm 43, dude. So He definitely thought I was that old, but okay. So it's one of those things where he's like, I'm done. He goes, if these young guys want to take that punishment and they want to continue with their careers in that way, by all means, do it. It happens in hockey, or it happens in MMA. It happens in football. But he said he's done with it. He says he's got a greater plan. There's more greatness for him to pursue, and this is what he wants to pursue. But it is dangerous because it's brand new. I mean, it's not like it was with alcohol back in the Prohibition days, but it is kind of similar. So I think McCall gave him the right advice, but Anthony says he doesn't want to fight anymore. He's not taking that damage. It's not me.
I think that Dana White has always kind of said it best, that if you question it, then just let it go. It's time to go if you're questioning it. That's why so many times we've said somebody's got their foot halfway in and out the door. Well, we have seen there are cases like an Eddie Wineland where he's had a foot out the door and he's performed exceptionally. Then there's Anthony Rumble Johnson, who has a foot out the door and goes out and has one of the all-time fart noise performances in UFC title history. So yeah, I'm all on board with him giving it up. If his heart isn't in it, then what? If I don't have to see him perform the way he did against Daniel Cormier again, cool.
Yeah, it's understandable. That was a performance that many of us, I mean, I didn't see that coming at all. But clearly now we're starting to understand why that performance happened. And maybe you can go back for those that always said that Anthony Johnson, the minute he's in trouble, he's going to quit. He'll give up his neck. He'll give up that rear naked choke. Perhaps his comments now will sort of get people to understand why. If he says he was never really a fighter, he enjoyed it. He was athletic. He liked, I guess, putting a hurt on people. But the minute he started getting hurt, I don't want to take this. I know other fighters that have competed in the UFC, Sean, that have told me this themselves. I won't give up any names, but they said, why would I take any more abuse?
Shane Carwin. How about that one? How about that one who deaded people for years? Deaded people. He caught his first couple of ass whoopings and he said, I think I'm good. I'm an engineer.
Civil engineer. Yep.
Yeah. I think I'm all set on that getting my ass kicked thing. So...
Yeah, so I mean, there are many fighters out there. Like I said, I don't want to give off any names, but I've had this conversation before, and they flat out looked me in the eye, knowing it was off the record. But they basically said, "Why? It's just I'm getting paid. I'm not going to be getting paid as much if I quit, but I ain't taking that head abuse anymore."
Yeah, and why should they? Given what we know now. And, I wonder what effects that'll have on the sport that I love in the future. But when I see all these people that are like, let's just adopt knees to the head of a grounded opponent, I'm like, what the hell's wrong with you, man? What the hell? One stuff takedown, the fight's over. There you go. The fight is over. Like, get a grip, get real. That ain't happening. And yeah, I'm all for it. If you say that and then you turn around and you write an article about CTE and how the UFC wasn't concerned about concussions, you're a hypocrite and you're a piece of crap. So, I mean, and I've seen plenty of that.
Yeah, it's. I think we're in an age right now, not just with the new ownership of the UFC. I think we're in an age right now where things are going to be almost so fluid that things are going to change. I mean, there's always a talk about fighters associations and unions, and we saw GSP sort of get into that momentarily. Now GSP is potentially not even coming back to fight Bisping. He may be coming back at 170 pounds, and fighters taking shots at the UFC, which back in the day was unheard of, or at least calling out the UFC. Who was it on the show at UFC 211? James Vick. He flat out said, "You guys aren't promoting me enough. Promote me enough. I'll take the winner of Chiesa and Lee." He's another guy.
I had a guy argue with me that Gilbert Melendez belonged in that top 15 over James Vick.
No, unfortunately not. Great fighter, but not now. No, he's only won once in 3 years, or once in the UFC or something.
Once in the UFC. Yeah.
Yeah. So a great fighter. In his heyday, when he was fighting in Japan and for Strikeforce, he was a fantastic fighter. But at the moment, no, you can't. I don't think you can put him in the top 15. Although he was on the Ultimate Fighter and fought for the title, I don't think he's that guy.
There are 20 guys at minimum that belong in there over Gilbert Melendez. I don't think Melendez is top 20. Top 20. I mean, because then you got like the Trinaldos and people like that who aren't even ranked.
It's a tough. I mean, that division is crazy as is. I mean, there's always going to be fluidity there, and I'm not the one I'm not the one to make this comment. John Anik was the first one to make this comment live on a broadcast, but he was bang on. You lose a fight at 155 pounds, you're going to have a long time to make up and probably get near a title shot. There's so much depth in that division, that and 170. There's so much depth there. One loss, when you start sniffing contendership, you're in big, big trouble. I mean, Donald Cerrone was able to do it a few times, but he's a rarity, man. He's a rarity.
And he's special. He's marketable. He fights all the time. It's easy for him to get back in there because a couple of wins for him puts you back in that. But yeah, we got Joseph Duffy in the chat saying, "Give me Vic Iaquinta in a war." Yeah, I'd be down for that.
Well, two guys that want to be promoted more. One guy's already promoting himself. One guy's taking that step to do it. I'd love to see that fight there for sure. That'd be fantastic. I mean, you break down that fight there. I think you're going to have to give obviously the reach advantage to Vic, which is obvious. But Iaquinta's got some skills, man. Both these guys have skills. That's a great fight. I'd like to see it as well.
Yeah, and that's the right move to make. You put two up-and-comers, and hey, you never know what these two are going to say about each other. You might get some Kevin Lee, Michael Chiesa magic now. Because like we said before last week, that wasn't a main event. It was in terms of quality of the fight. Like you're talking about talent in the ring, talent in the cage. But after last week, that is a main event, period. I want to see that. I got a reason. It's like in pro wrestling, you want a reason to watch matches, and if they don't give you a reason to, it's like, why? That's not always the case in MMA. Sometimes good fighters are enough. That wasn't enough for a main event, but one little comment about somebody's mother, and all of a sudden things get heated.
That thing got ugly real quick, and it was what it needed. It's as crazy as it sounds. It's what that fight needed. And that's the kind of stuff, unfortunately, that sells fights. Fortunately and unfortunately, because that sells fights, because now you got heat. I'll never forget when Randy Couture fought Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira, and there was like zero sort of hype for that fight because, yeah, it was two legends, but there was no real animosity, two good guys, don't really talk trash. And I asked Dana White, hey, man, like, are you having a problem? Did you have a problem promoting this fight? Because we're 3 or 4 days away from the main event, or three or 4 days away from the pay-per-view. Do you think you're gonna have a hard time selling pay-per-views? And he cut me off right away. But he's gonna put on his promoter hat and just do his thing. He's like, no, this is what happens when you get two legends that are good guys and blah blah. Fight turned out to be fantastic, but that doesn't mean if a tree falls in the forest, someone's gonna see it or hear it.
It's very true. They are gonna be able to use that footage. Just in the build-up. They got to do something special with that. I just hope nothing too bad happens to a Kevin Lee for the punch he threw. Because he's going to get some sort of punishment off of that. He has to. Because you can't just have people punching each other all willy-nilly at pressers.
Willy-nilly.
Yeah.
That's a Southern thing?
It's just a thing. It's just a thing, man.
Yeah. No, listen. What do you make of those the fans that said it was all staged?
Oh God. Listen, guys. I cover staged pro wrestling for a living, and let me tell you, these people work really hard to become great actors at staging what they do. That wasn't staged. They're not that good at acting. But I will say this, Conor McGregor changed the world. The UFC, Dana White are like, thank God he came around. Because it has a trickle-down effect. Everybody sees how to do it. Now, should Kevin Lee be out there dressed like Russell Westbrook? No. I mean, he stole the outfit from Russell Westbrook. How dare you? How dare you have the balls, Kevin Lee? Big fan of his fighting ability, but how dare you, for one, say that Conor McGregor wants to be like you when you are dressed like Russell Westbrook? Do you know who Michael Rappaport is?
Yeah.
Fantastic podcast, entertaining guy. And he covers NBA a lot. He says that Russell Westbrook has spearheaded the skinny genification of the NBA.
Oh, wow. Wow.
And unfortunately, Conor McGregor has spearheaded the skinny genification of MMA a little bit. But the thing is, it doesn't necessarily help the NBA. It helps MMA. MMA could have... They needed a little skinny genification. They needed some of that.
As opposed to the Affliction era?
Hell yeah, man. Hell yeah, man. American Fighter's the new one. I've told you that before, but like here in Kentucky, like I wouldn't be caught dead in anything American Fighter these days. Fine for those who do. It's just not my style. But they made the best rash guard I ever saw when they had the American Pie knockoff logo back in the day, and Rich Franklin was pushing them and Matt Hamill was pushing them. But now they like rebranded into like a modern day Affliction, and people that you see and you're like, you've never fought in your life, whether on the mats or... And there's nothing wrong with not doing that. Violence isn't a conflict or isn't a resolution on the streets, but they've got the new thing. They've got the American Fighter, and I'm like, man, who would have thought? But good for American Fighter, first off, for rebranding themselves and finding success. Hey, Tap Out had to do it. Tap Out moved over to pro wrestling. They're like, we've stayed our welcome in MMA, and we've overstayed it rather, and they partnered up with WWE, and now they got John Cena and Charlotte and Becky Lynch wearing their clothes every week.
So for those MMA fans that are tuned in right now that don't know, that don't pay attention or watch professional wrestling, it's probably news to them that Tap Out did that, because Tap Out was synonymous with the UFC pretty much from day one. They were synonymous with their logo, their gear, the crew always showing up at events, even after Mask passed away. Skyscraper was there, Punk Ass was there. They were always there. And then slowly but surely...
Times change, man. Times change, and so do demographics. Somebody says I was sad that Jesus didn't get over huge. Well, first off, how's he going to tap? He's nailed to a cross. Let's just first get that one out of the way. That one was kind of weird. But there were a lot, like Form Athletics. I loved Form Athletics. I thought they did some great stuff. Somebody says, anyone remember Hitman Fight Gear? I do. That was in Kmart for a while. That was pretty big. MMA Elite was like the kind that would be more affordable, and everybody would be able to get it. It's crazy how Kevin Lee got us into a conversation about MMA fashion because he ripped off Russell Westbrook. My original point was, how dare you say that Conor McGregor wants to be like you in general? But to say that when you're directly ripping off a Russell Westbrook outfit, weird. But yeah, do you remember how big MMA apparel was back then?
Well, if you look at the bottom of your screen and you look at my name, that name emanated from my company, a company that I co-founded called Showdown Fightwear, Showdown Boxing. We were in the UFC early on in the days. I think Jeremy Horn versus, if I'm not mistaken, Jeremy Horn versus Chuck Liddell the first time they fought. So 1-0 against Tap Out. And then Elvis Sinisic, I think when he fought Frank Shamrock, when he fought Tito Ortiz, I think he was donning Showdown Fightwear shorts. So the name Showdown Joe came from when I had the company Showdown Fightwear and Showdown Boxing. So I was fully entrenched in the MMA industry. That's how I basically got in to broadcasting, believe it or not, because it was me training, me meeting a guy, and we talked and we had a great idea. I had connections, he had connections. Let's come up with a company, Showdown, blah, 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 Showdown Fightwear. We started sponsoring events, UCC and TKO, which obviously gave us guys like George St. Pierre. We had Carlos Newton. We had Fedor in some of our gloves back in the day. But when people would go to local grappling events or MMA events and they said, hey, man, I want to get a shirt. I want to get a pair of gloves. I want to get some wraps. And they'd always say, go see Joe. Well, Joe who? And they would point to our big banner, Showdown Joe. And that's how the Showdown Joe name came about, which obviously has to do with fighting and stuff like that. But yeah, no, the apparel game was huge. And I knew that, we would have to go up against Tap Out and Bad Boy and the big companies back then. And we had a great business plan, unfortunately. Trying to condense a story here, not to air any dirty laundry. I chose to leave that. I chose to leave the company just because I wasn't agreeing with what was happening. And, here I am today. And that's what got me into broadcasting, because when I went to the UCC TKO, they asked me to be a color commentator for their events, for their fights. From there, it spawned relationships, networking, blah, blah, Sportsnet, Fightful, boom, here I am. Titan FC, in 2 days, 3 days, I leave for Titan. Miami there, right there. Can you see that?
And what I'll ask you is, do you think that the UFC's sponsor tax and the sponsorship of, like, obviously Reebok, all that stuff, because the sponsor tax hurt too, do you think that put a lot of these people out of business? Because I don't remember the last time I saw a Hitman shirt, Death Clutch, Warrior Wear, Punishment Athletics, Triumph United, Full Contact Fighter, Sprawl, Silver Star,
Sprawl was huge.
Extreme Couture, Title MMA. What else? Dethrone, Clinch Gear, Throwdown, which our logo looks a lot like. I just realized our logo looks a lot like the Throwdown. Our RCVA, Jayco, Bad Boy, Everlast. Which I mean, Everlast is gonna be fine. They're entrenched in the game. Venom, even. All those people, like, it was hard to not get sponsored back then.
Now it's totally different. So the question you asked was, do I think the Reebok deal potentially puts some of those companies out of business? You may have just answered your own question, sir, because the ability to sponsor fighters and the ability to actually get your logo on a fighter and then get grand stage like the UFC, whether it's on pay-per-view, whether it's on Fox, whether it's on Fight Pass, whatever, at the time was pretty good. Now, the UFC then puts on a sponsor tax, basically saying you're either big enough to be with us or you're going to have to pay a huge amount of money to be with us. It was one of those two things. So even that was difficult to become part of the UFC. So when you take a look at what this Reebok deal did, it forced all these different companies to look elsewhere, obviously Bellator and any other event, but the viewership simply isn't there. If you weren't with the UFC and or Bellator, World Series of Fighting, and some of these other organizations, you're not going to get that viewership. You know, to me, it's a breath of fresh air whenever I call a Titan event, because I'll watch a Titan event. I get to see all these different sponsors all over again, some of them local for some of the fighters. I don't know how that translates to a lot of the local. I don't know how it translates for some of the bigger sponsors as well. But, being with a company like Titan FC, it's a breath of fresh air because it reminds me of almost what it feels like it should be. Now, the Reebok deal is fantastic if you're the UFC, not necessarily so great for the fighters because now you've blocked off potential. Like if you're getting paid X amount of money from Reebok because you're fighting in the UFC, but you could have got Y amount from another sponsor, clothing sponsor, that sucks. That sucks, right? Yeah. And any other sponsors, it's very difficult, but the UFC is their own sport. It's their own brand. It's not their own sport, excuse me. It's their own brand. It's like the NHL or GSP said it best when the question was before his return, when I was talking to him about the Under Armour deal, and I said, well, what's the deal with the Under Armour thing? If you go back to the UFC, you got a Reebok situation. And before that press conference with Bisping and before the press conference of him coming back, he flat out told me, he's like, go look up Tom Brady and Under Armour. Tom Brady wears Under Armour. When he plays, he wears Nike. I think the Patriots are sponsored by Reebok. So either way, when I'm on the playing surface, I've got to wear that sponsor. Outside of it, I can wear whatever I want. Now, GSP is much bigger than 99% of the fighters that are out there. So we can get away with doing Under Armour shoots and blah, blah, blah. But that's something that guys like Elias Theodorou will take a look at, getting the sponsorship with Pert Plus and getting stuff like that. So there are ways to make money. You're just not going to capitalize it with the UFC. If that's the case, go to plan B, go to plan C, figure it out.
Do you think it sticks around after the current deal is up? Because we got new ownership now. So they may look at things and say, we're cutting a bunch of fighters and we're trying to keep morale up. Let this happen. If I were them, I would hire brokers to help negotiate, say, hey, if you guys want us to negotiate your sponsorships with some other people, we'll take a cut of that. Like, act as the manager, like, not necessarily the manager, but like to a degree, be able to help broker sponsors for fighters if they're able to. I mean, I don't know, that may violate some rules, especially if like if certain things go down that put that into question. But I mean, the UFC can work with companies to sponsor fighters as well, I'm sure. But then you'll have accusations of playing favorites and stuff. So maybe just the old method's better.
Yeah, well, the old method definitely works. I mean, you could start talking about collusion and conflict of interest, and they're getting a cut when they shouldn't be getting a cut, and they're still taking money out of the fighter's pocket one way or the other. So I do like the old way. It was more or less every man for himself, as long as the UFC can basically. The UFC was going to capitalize on it no matter what. That's why they had that sponsor tax. It sucks, but it would have been nice if it was just simply, hey, listen, you want the fighters to make money, let them get their own sponsorship, just okay the sponsor. What was the condom one that used to be back in the day? Condom Depot. Like, do you want that as part of your brand, the UFC? Probably not. Maybe you put a stop to that one there. Nothing wrong with it. But for the UFC purposes, maybe not a good idea. right? So you could put a stop to that. But in a perfect world for you want to make the fighters happy?
Yeah.
Let them get their own sponsors and just simply veto it if you like it or not, and don't take $1 from it. No sponsor tax, done.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to do it, and then you have a better opportunity. I mean, if you don't raise salaries because they're trying to make that money back, then that doesn't bother nearly as much. And who knows? Maybe we'll see a new influx of apparel companies again, because back then everybody wanted to start their own. But the sponsor tax was originally started because people were getting screwed out of money. Well, here's a quick way to handle it. Say if you want to get a sponsor, you have to get paid up front. You have to get paid up front or nothing else. No paying after the fight deal. That I would maybe put that in the UFC fighter contracts. Say,
but what if the fighter doesn't make it to the fight and gets injured?
Pay
condition on
the week of, at least.
Yeah.
Kevin Lee, man, sparked a conversation.
Yeah. No, it's great. I think it's part of it all. I mean, I'm not sure if the article that I submitted to you today for your beautiful review, I'm sure you were doing your hair at the time, if you were reading it or not. I basically, speaking of conversation, it was just been running through my mind, and I brought it up to you at the end of the podcast on Saturday, or I guess Sunday morning. Are UFC events simply too long for fans?
Yeah.
Are they simply too long? 6.5 or 6 hours and 40 minutes is the average when you compare them to the NHL, NBA, and Major League Baseball, which are under 3 hours, and the NFL is simply over 3 hours by 6 minutes. So on average, you're talking 2.5 to 3 hours for Major League Baseball, NHL, NBA, NFL, and 6 hours and 40 minutes for the UFC. So the question I had is that simply too much for one sitting? So I propose, hey, why not have a fight night during the week where there's, it's a 2-hour broadcast, 4 fights. Leave your pay-per-views once a month where there's only 5 fights on that main card. You still go from 10 o'clock Eastern till about 1 o'clock or 1 a.m. The next morning. You spread it out. Hockey does it, or Major League Baseball. Major League Baseball plays at least 6 games a week at minimum, sometimes 7. But the NFL is once a week, but it's all Sunday, right? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, is it makes sense potentially? It's obviously there's a lot of things you'd have to look at if you're the UFC, especially seasonal, because you don't want to go against the NBA or whatever, or Major League Baseball in the summer, NBA in the winter, NFL on a Sunday and stuff like that. But you take a look at, why not a 2-hour midweek fight week live? Great fights, fighters that should be being developed for pay-per-view. Once a month you have your pay-per-view with established stars, okay, as opposed to having a 6.5-hour event for fans. They got to be there at 6:30 at minimum for that first fight. 6:30
But
Eastern.
they never are.
They never are. But if a hardcore fan wants to do that, they're there from 6:30 Eastern at minimum till way past midnight, probably hammered out of their tree by that point because you've been drinking for 7 hours, 8 hours. Is it too long?
Yeah, it is. And we're starting to see the UFC employ Sunday cards more. Like, we'll see that with the Sweden card. That'll be in mid-afternoon here in America. A lot of the time, I hear from a crossover audience, from pro wrestling, a very casual audience. And one of the things I always hear is, well, when does the main event start? Then I hear, when does the main card start? Or how long till the main card? Well, that gets you in a slippery territory because the UFC always puts a good fight on the prelim main event because they want people, like, they wouldn't move Poirier and Alvarez from that prelim main event spot because they wanted it there. And they had already advertised it, and what they promised Fox and FS1 and FX or whatever is what they want. It doesn't need to be that long, but what they have to, they're trying to serve a lot of masters. They're trying to serve the pay-per-view master. They're trying to serve the Fox master. They're trying to serve their own selves, their own Fight Pass brand. My thing would be one Fight Pass fight. One, if you had to. 2 prelims, and then your 5 main card fights. I would limit it to 8 to 9 fights. You don't need 10 fights. A 4.5-hour show is plenty long and probably a little too long.
Yeah, I still think it's long. I really still think it's too long.
And and now there's always the concern, well, what if something falls off? Well, if something falls off, if you have one fight fall off, well, then you just don't have a Fight Pass show. Say, I'm sorry, we'll make it up to you. That's your brand. You can do whatever you want with it. And if something falls off the Fox show, you do the same thing. You move the prelim up. Or you can have Brian Stan and Daniel Cormier out there talking. Show a fight from the last card. They showed UFC, what was it, the December pay-per-view, 206 maybe? They showed the whole pay-per-view a couple weeks after it aired because it was so good and nobody watched it on pay-per-view that they aired it on Fox. You can use that as a promotional tool and say, look what you missed on the last pay-per-view. You fool. You didn't pay your $60 to watch this? Well, you better, because you're not always going to get that here. You lucked out this time. There are ways around this.
That's what production meetings are for. There are smart minds at the UFC on that production team, believe me. Tim O'Toole being the top of that food chain. Very smart guy. He's got a great amount of staff that could bring up ideas like this. I think it could work. I think a midweek show every Wednesday, for example. You want to get rid of the Ultimate Fighter, get rid of the Ultimate Fighter. But every Wednesday, you have this midweek show, 2 hours, 4 fights. You have your pay-per-view once a month, done. You can add a Fight Pass fight to each one of those as a backup, potentially. And then you take it from there. I mean, but the chasm I had was 6.5 hours is a long time for hardcore fans. Most of the fans aren't going to show up there to watch that first fight at 6:30 Eastern, p.m. Eastern. They're going to probably show up closer to the main card unless that Fox card is fantastic. Then the question I asked was, from a media perspective, is it simply too long of a day? It's technically it's not. It's an 8.5 hour shift on fight night. It's not really, to me, it's not really a job. I mean, I'm not gonna lie to you, it's not a job. I love fighting. I love the UFC. I love mixed martial arts, and it's to get paid to do something you love is fantastic. But I want to compare it to other peeps. I want to compare it to other sports. And in the article, I spoke to another media member who's with Fightful, and he gave me his take, and I thought, oh, I may not be onto something for the media, but I may be onto something for the fans. So, if I don't have access to the live chat, Sean, my apologies. I don't know what the fans may be saying. Is 6.5 hours or 6 hours and 40 minutes on average too much? Too much for a UFC fan?
Virtually everybody is saying that it's too long, and we have Adam Ball asking if it's an overhead issue. I don't think that, because, they're gaining more costs. Now, there are some things like Strikeforce. They would run a lot of fights, because what they would do is they would go to, say, Nashville, and they would put a bunch of semi-local people on the prelim card and really extend it, because King Mo wasn't selling the venue out. Gegard Musashi wasn't selling the venue out. Even Ronda Rousey wasn't selling the venue out. So they would hope that the friends and the family of those locals would come there. And you see that with Bellator today. That's a thing that they do as well. I think you got to shorten it a little bit. I'm okay with the number of cards. I'm okay with that. I really am. It should be less, but because, absence makes the heart grow fonder. I was excited for UFC this past weekend because I hadn't seen it in a while. But now, and it's a pain for people on the East Coast. For us, it's tough, guys. It is rough. UFC pay-per-view nights, I usually get to bed about 4 a.m. And I'm not doing the live coverage, and I'm not doing the post-fight articles. What happens is I'll do articles in the middle of the show. Like if somebody breaks their leg, I'll do an article on that. If there's a title change, I do something on that. If there's a big fight result, I got to do that as well. But David Tease is doing the play-by-play, and then I have either Steve Muehlhausen or Pat Fannin, who we put together basically they invoice it as a post-fight package where they're live tweeting the presser, because I'm on a podcast with you. So I'm out there promoting the podcast during that time. As soon as I get off of the podcast, maybe an hour later, I got to catch up on the presser. I got to know what's going on there. That way I can say, hey, you do this article, I'll do this article. Then I got to get videos up. I got to schedule videos for the morning, because you don't want to have a bare morning of content. You don't want to... You got to have the Octagon interviews up and the backstage interviews up and all that stuff. Mike Straw in the chat says, covering UFC 210, Joe and I left at 3:30 or 4 in the morning. By the time I was done working that night, it was 5:30 a.m. when I went to bed, because they cater to the West Coast. It used to be, a lot of sports will cater to the East Coast. Now, I'm not saying that they should do that, but damn, and the West Coast are watching these pay-per-views from 7 to 10.
Must be nice.
Must be nice, man. I would love to be able to be done at 1 or 2.
Just real quick before you go on, just for Mike Straw. Yeah, we were tired. I mean, I didn't get to, and I walked back. We left the arena 3:30, 4 o'clock. I walked back to my hotel. I got to the hotel around 4:20. No Diaz pun intended there. 4:30ish around there. By the time I passed out, it was 5 a.m. I had to leave the next morning to get home to do the podcast with you. Actually, no, we didn't do the podcast, but I had to drive home 2.5 hours to get home. But Mike, just I know you're watching right now. Imagine covering it on the West Coast if you were able to catch and cover a UFC in Vegas or in California. You're done at 1 a.m., 12 o'clock, 1 a.m. It's cool. And your flight doesn't leave till 3 o'clock the afternoon the next day. It's worth going to Vegas. Just Jimmy Van. Is Jimmy Van watching this?
Not right now. He's in meetings. Mike Straw says, I'd be all for getting rid of Tough. It's gotten too stale. I think they will after the next season. If I were them, I think they'll only bring it back for special seasons. They're starting to learn that they got to do something special. They got to put a title on the line, or they've got to do a comeback season, or they got to do something like that, because otherwise people aren't going to watch. And if Dana White's new Contender series takes off, I see Fox saying, hey, let us have that instead. Because, I mean, the fights are outside of when it's for a title are more important. They count towards a guy's record. Why the hell didn't they count on the Ultimate Fighter live? That's weird. But you see things that they do. They're like, okay, we'll bring in a new division of girls, 135, 115 title, a 125 title, a comeback season, a live season. They've tried things like that. I think they're missing out by doing another heavyweights season. That one was a big hit. Because, I mean, but they're like, if we got a heavyweight prospect, we just want to sign them.
That's what it basically is. It still is today.
Yeah, because it's so bare.
I would take a look at, I got to be careful how I word this, because I don't want people to take this the wrong way. But there's a lot of CM Punks out there. A lot of big name people out there. Big names that would love to try mixed martial arts, and you could pull potentially from the NFL, from professional wrestling, from hockey, from whatever sport, that aren't really making it in that sport, have a bit of a name, but now you put them in a house with 15 other dudes, and you may have, right? There's tons of them out there. You just got to find the right weight class, try and get them to understand cutting weight and stuff like that. But that could be a whole totally different Ultimate Fighter. One of them's going to come out, maybe two. There's an idea I should be getting paid for this, Sean. We should be getting paid.
I would watch a freak show
Ultimate Fighter
with Sean Merriman and CM Punk. Keep in mind, they had a bit of a feud when CM Punk was in WWE, because he saw Sean Merriman trying to get with some of the WWE women, and they shot him down, and they went back and forth on Twitter. So they're completely, like, Sean Merriman's a heavyweight, but still, I mean, them in a house. I mean, Jose Canseco tried to fight.
Yeah.
Did you ever watch Liar Liar?
No, I didn't.
The movie? There's a line where Jim Carrey says,
I've seen it. Yeah, sorry.
I had a video of Hongman Choi beating up Jose Canseco, and I dubbed the audio of Jim Carrey going, "But I'm Jose Canseco," over it when he was getting arrested or pulled from court. Good times.
Yeah. You know what? But wouldn't you watch Jose Canseco for 12 weeks?
Yeah. He's crazy as shit. Of course I would.
We got to stop this. We got to stop giving up these ideas. We're giving up way too much ideas for the UFC.
Thomas says, that's a crap show, so let's watch unskilled people do MMA. Yeah, I'd rather watch them do unskilled MMA in exhibition fights than real fights on pay-per-view, buddy.
Is Thomas T taking shots at both of us? Because I mentioned CM Punk. I just noticed that. CM Punk is giving me a come on. Is that a shot at me, or just an idea, son? Just an idea. Lots of ideas out there. I don't know about this Contender series. I want to get into that. That kind of made me upset on Saturday. There's a bunch of things happening. I'm glad you actually mentioned that the next show for the UFC is on a Sunday, because I was about to do something on that Sunday, and I'm not doing it anymore, Sean. So I appreciate you telling me. I'm looking forward to going back. I leave for Florida tomorrow, I was him covering, or I'm doing play-by-play for Titan FC, because there were so many American top team fighters on this card that competed at UFC 211. So I'm looking forward to running into some of them. I'd like to run into, Johanna Jacek. I don't think so. I've never seen her at a Titan event, and we don't usually get out to American top team. But there's a lot of peeps here that I would like to speak to just to get their thoughts on a bunch of things, because, man, that was a stacked card for them. I'm hoping to run into a bunch of them. I want to ask you, we didn't really talk about this on the post show on Saturday. Chase Sherman, were you impressed by his performance, or were you like, this guy's going to gas himself out? Lo and behold, he gassed himself out and almost cost him the fight.
I appreciated his effort, but not impressed. That was a sloppy fight. It was a sloppy fight, and it's heavyweight. You're allowed to. You got some room to have a sloppy fight. I haven't been impressed with much of Chase Sherman in the UFC. It was a good fight. Don't get me wrong. I really enjoyed it, but he's lost. He lost against Walt Harris. He lost his first fight, I think, in August. He's just, he's not that good. I remember I think he's got a loss to Alex Nicholson, and Alex Nicholson's like, what, a 185-pounder last year?
I don't think I called. That was the show before I started the play-by-play stuff. I think I was a roaming reporter for that one. If I'm not, I'm pretty sure I was roaming reporter for that one there. Yeah,
it's the story of heavyweight. As Justin Golightly, one of our former reporters, says in the chat, people love unskilled MMA. I do too. It's fun. Yeah, that's pretty much. And this was very largely unskilled MMA. It was sloppy.
I don't know if it was sloppy.
That's kind of sloppy.
No, there was some technique there for the big guys. I think he was doing good. I think what happened is, he when he got Coulter on the ground, I don't think he was smart in realizing that, hey man, I may not be able to finish this guy. He's tough as nails. I got to start pacing myself here. And I think he almost punched himself out because he was on wobbly legs and that fight went back to the ground. But I was okay with some of his stand-up, with some of his footwork. So, I'm okay with Chase Sherman. I got to tell you, Rashad Coulter, those got a heart and just insane at how he fights. But yeah, it's I could see what you're saying, Sean. There's a bit of sloppiness there. I get it, but they're heavyweights. You can't expect them to fight like featherweights.
Sammy Ole says 2 fat guys at heavyweight is unacceptable. That's just not the reality of things, man. Like, look at Fabricio Verdum. He's not a big, ripped dude. Cain Velasquez has never been a ripped dude. Like, if you're that big, chances are, unless you're on some shit, then you're going to probably have a little extra weight. That's just the nature of things.
Yeah, a lot of stuff. Dana White gave some props to James Vick. He actually acknowledged in the post-fight press conference that this kid called us out. This kid, whatever. But, what do you do if you're the UFC and James Vick? What do you do with James Vick? Because there's 500 fighters on that roster. They can't promote every single one of them. At some point, you've got to be able to step out of the UFC's promotional umbrella, promote yourself, and maybe get underneath a bigger umbrella with the UFC. There's a guy, I don't know if you ever heard of him, named Conor McGregor, who did that. And he wasn't even a main event on a show that they did in Boston, if I'm not mistaken. And he had his own poster. There was the whole card with the poster, all the fighters, and Conor McGregor had his own poster. And he was allowed to be at the press conference. The guys were like, what is this? Who's this guy? Why? Well, Conor McGregor has that thing, has that it factor, and he proved it. So if you're the UFC, you're Dana White, you're Sean Shelby, what do you do with a guy like James Vick?
Well, they knew Conor McGregor was going to be something special way early on. Do you remember, I think it was maybe the Boston show? I can't remember what it was. It was an FS1 show where they gave him like the lights out entrance and all that stuff before a lot of people knew who he was. If I'm the UFC, I give James Vick a good top 15 fight. Ally Quinta is, hey, I think that's a great idea. I think that's a phenomenal idea. You can put that as a co-main or a main on an FS1 show and sell it in, where the hell's James Vick from?
Texas, isn't he?
Okay, sell it in New York then. Texas. No offense to James Vick. They're not going to give a damn about him there. But in New York, they still want to run some shows up in the New York, New Jersey area, and they got a lot of fighters that are from up there. So, I would do that. Also, I would encourage James Vick to get away from Lloyd Irvin.
I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're saying. Now, a lot of stuff happened on that show. You and I had discussed it, especially the Eddie Alvarez Dustin Poirier fight. Um, I guess referee Herb Dean came out, did an interview, but no matter which way you turn, you would assume everyone believes that that was a disqualification. Unfortunately, not necessarily so. I had a chance to catch up with Sean Pierson to get his thoughts on that and a bunch of other things. But you tell me, play the clip whenever you get a chance. Sean Pierson giving me his thoughts on whether or not it was a disqualification.
Yeah, and we'll talk about this a little bit after he's done talking. But I want to show you all this clip. Sean Pierson, and maybe not on the same page as us, and I was a little surprised. So here you go, Pierson talking to Joe. Joe had a little bit of technical issues here because he's an oaf. He's an oaf. But check it out.
UFC 211 went down. Lots of controversy, especially with the Dustin Poirier Eddie Alvarez situation. It was ruled a no contest, but the reality is it was an illegal knee. Eddie Alvarez should have been disqualified. Your thoughts?
I understand by the rule set, but it's a double-edged sword here. I agree by the rule set. Obviously, it should be DQ, but at the end of the day, MMA was created to simulate fighting. I don't know if I fully agree with the rule anyways. Kneeing a down opponent, to me, I don't know. I have a hard time. It's like the whole front headlock position. You should be able to knee the guy in the head. You're in a position of advantage. You should be able to knee the guy. So, yeah, by your rule set, I get it. It should be a DQ. But at the same time, I feel like, do you know what I mean? It's a fight. You're in there. And I'll tell you this. When you're rocked, and, Alvarez has definitely been rocked, you're fighting. You're going on a lot of instincts there, and and he saw an opportunity, went for the finish. You're right, probably should have been DQ'd, but I'm okay with the no contest based on the fact is he's in there trying to survive and do his thing. So again, I understand the problem here, but at the same time, we're trying to simulate fights right now.
Are you okay with some of the criticism out there right now that's going on with Johanna Jędrzejczyk saying that she can't finish fights? Damian Maia, who was loved heading into his fight with Jorge Masvidal, that he barely gets punched in the face. He's able to just take guys down, take their back and choke them out, but then fights a guy like Masvidal and is unable to get that choke. Now he's getting criticism saying he can't finish fights or he's a boring fighter and all that stuff. I mean, I'm baffled by it. What about you?
I'm not baffled by it. I agree that he's a boring fighter. And when I say he's a boring fighter, I mean from a general public perspective, because I think I saw a headline, this guy could be UFC champion, yet he doesn't punch. Again, it's what people want to see. And I've said it from the start. You can put two drunk guys in the octagon if they're locals, crowds are going to watch. Maia's a great fighter. He's yet to find his mark on how to sell fights. Like if I look at guys who don't punch a lot that, I think could sell would be Ben Askren right now. He found his voice and he's entertaining for people. You know what I mean? I'm not saying his fights are the most entertaining, but I even still want to, tune in to check him out, but he's found his voice. Maia's got two problems right now. One, he's not the most exciting guy to the average fan to watch. And two, he doesn't have a voice. So, if you got to have one or the other, either performing and you're talking inside the octagon or you're doing it, inside. Even, who's the guy from Iceland? Gunnar Nelson. Gunnar Nelson, he's got an image thing that he's looking at where he's got, a quirky style standing up. He's got some great jiu-jitsu, and he's got that cold face, almost like the Rory McDonald, like Icelandic psycho. I don't know what his nickname is going to be, but he's got an image and a bit of a voice. His voice is not saying anything, but he's got something there. And Maia's, he doesn't have that yet.
One guy that always had a voice was Joe Silva. If anyone that's ever met him, he was never afraid to voice his opinion. Joe Silva will be going into the UFC Hall of Fame. Your thoughts on that and any stories regarding Joe Silva?
No, like Joe, again, I interacted with Joe. He did all the matchmaking. Respectful guy. And he was, to me, he was very, straightforward. Like I remember, my only story is, when I lost, was it Brian Foster? I was supposed to fight on the Toronto card.
Yep.
And we had about a week and a half to go. And he was trying to find me a similar style fight as far as skill matchup. And at the end of the day, he couldn't do it. And he said, well, listen, Sean, one of the only guys that accepted the fight was Ellenberger. And he goes, listen, Sean, this fight is well above, Brian Foster at that point saying, this is a much. And I had to make a decision, either get pulled from the card or take the fight. But he was straight with it. He wasn't trying to fool me saying, hey, Sean, this is an equal fight, or, you know what I mean? He was just straight up saying, it's all I got. It's all I can do for you if you want to stay on the Toronto card. And I, you know, put my head down and said, let's do it, you know. But I thought he was a great guy, straightforward, and you know, he probably deserves to be in that Hall of Fame. He's been in the UFC a long time.
One of the things that made the UFC huge, which basically created a Hall of Fame eventually because the sport almost went downhill, was the Ultimate Fighter. This season right now with Team Dillashaw and Team Garbrandt, it isn't too bad. I don't know if you're watching. Are you enjoying it at all if you are?
I haven't seen an episode in about 6 years. I don't even know who's on the show. I remember rumors that it was sort of an ex-tough show or something. So all people that have been on it before, but I haven't even watched an episode, nor do I care to.
Not a big fan of the Ultimate Fighter anymore?
No, it lost its thing for me. Like, you know, at first I sort of, the things I liked about it are the things that they got away from. Like, I like seeing the different training techniques and the, you know, and then eventually they went into just the theatrics. I think the last season I ever saw was that Junie Browning kid that was on there. So I remember he threw a bottle at somebody, and then I think he did something else stupid. And I just remember thinking to myself, I would have knifed this kid right in the throat, right on national TV. And then I realized that the show's not for me.
So if you were given the opportunity to go on that show and they paid you a pretty good amount of money, let's say a year's salary that you're getting paid right now, would you do it?
You double up my year's salary, I might do it. But, you know, I'm a forward thinker. A year's salary, what's that do for me? Because I take a nice year's salary, and then am I coming back going to the UFC for a higher paycheck, or am I taking a tough contract? Because I hear those tough contracts suck.
Duly noted. Well,
you know, I'm not saying I would or wouldn't. If I was 22, 23, maybe I make another decision. But right now, I'm like, you know, I mean, a year's salary is great, perfect, okay, cool. But what do I do after that contract, or after that year's salary is gone? Do I get paid how Conor McGregor gets paid? Because then I'll stay and fight. I don't deserve that money. I get it, but I'll stay and fight. But without those big paychecks, it's not worth it.
So I think it's safe to say that Pierson's a dope.
That's Pierson, though. Pierson's the boy. He's a man. He's awesome.
But I mean, if it were his half of the pay, I bet you his stance would be a little bit different. He'd be like, oh, yeah, that's an absolute DQ. Had he put some money on it, I think he would be like, that's a DQ. I can't believe that not only did Herb Dean do that, but he doubled down on his statement. Because it was illegal no matter what. It was illegal. That was a DQ stoppage in any state under the old rules or the new rules. Now, the first knee would have been legal under the new rules. Texas doesn't have the new rules. They got the old rules. And I would like announcers in the UFC to stop talking about those rules if they don't understand them yet. Because they without, and I love Joe Rogan, but he makes it very confusing. Because he explains it, and then he's like, but maybe. No. Take a course. Learn something. I know we tried to have Trig, he's over in the Philippines, to talk about this. He'll talk about it with you whenever he's back, but it's not that difficult, Joe. It's not as hard as everybody makes it out to be.
It's not. It definitely is not. Trig apologizes to yourself and everybody on the site, as well as all the fans and viewers that do tune in, and especially those audio as well. We tried to connect yesterday prior to him leaving the Philippines, but the connection was... I wasn't able to hear anything he was saying, but we were able to text back and forth and get his thoughts and stuff like that. It's illegal, man. It was an illegal knee, no matter which way you look at it. Before he's got lots of love for Herb Dean, obviously, because I think they've done a couple shows together. But and he knows Herb Dean very well. But it is one of those things where the rule is simple, and it's not even that difficult when you look at the old rule versus the new rule. Right? It's been a modification, and it's not that difficult to learn it, right? And it's not that difficult really to unlearn it very quickly when you're going to Texas. I wanted to ask you this though, and I guess I could have asked Sean. I could have asked anyone, any of the fighters out there. I could ask you, being a fellow media member, a fan. When I read stuff and hear stuff, whether it's on a UFC broadcast or you read something on a site, how it's not fair for the fighters to have to not know the rules when they go to commission to commission. I call bullshit. I'll tell you why I call bullshit. Because if I know that I'm fighting in Texas, and I know Texas has not adopted the new unified rules of MMA, and I'm 10 weeks out of camp. Well, guess what I'm training for? I'm training old MMA style where, knees are illegal and blah, blah, blah. Okay? Either way, if I'm a fighter, it's incumbent on me and my management, okay, and perhaps even the UFC. Enough people should tell you, hey, you know what? You're fighting in Texas. They haven't adopted the new rules. Knees are illegal at this point. Knees are not illegal here, blah, blah, blah. You're fighting in Vegas with the new rules. 8 weeks from now, you train with that. How can the fighters not know? If I'm playing, again, sorry for being Canadian, okay? I'm playing NHL hockey, okay? I'm playing in the NHL. I know the surface of the ice. All of a sudden, I make it to Team Canada, and I get to go play overseas in Europe where the ice is way bigger. A game changes a little bit. I'm not going to practice my power plays or whatever I'm doing in a smaller surface. We got a bigger surface, more ice to work with. There was what's called the floating red line. There were so many different changes. Well, if you're going to go to a state as a professional fighter to compete in a state that hasn't adopted the rules, that's what you train for. You don't find out the day before. You don't find out at weigh-ins. You find out when you sign that contract. I don't get this. Oh, the fighters are confused. How the hell are they confused?
Hey, I'm with you, man. I was surprised when John Jones threw those downward elbows. For like a couple years, John Jones was like headbutting people in the body and like doing things. I'm like, how don't you know the rules, man? And I explained this on our last podcast. They used to fit on a single Wikipedia screen. It's gotten a little more elaborate since then, but the rules are not that hard for MMA, and they used to be even simpler. But if you followed as long as an Eddie Alvarez has, then you've known these rules as they come along. Now, hey, if you're just jumping into the sport, if you're not a Joe Rogan, you're not a John Anik, you're not an Eddie Alvarez who are explaining or performing the actions, that's fine. I still learn. I'm a huge football fan, and I still learn a little bit about the intricacies of the rules there. But you're talking about two people in a cage, not a couple dozen people on a field. It's not that hard.
I see some of the comments on the live chat now, Sean, and I see people saying, well, the guy was half knocked out. That's what he does for a living. And he should know the rules. The rules are simple. It's a sport where you're going to get knocked out. If I got, again, hockey analogy, if I got body checked in hockey really, really hard, and I go after the guy and start swinging my stick at his head,
getting hit in the face prior or not paying attention doesn't absolve you from any blame of committing the foul. That's the thing where Herb Dean was like, well, he couldn't have possibly seen. Well, whose fault is that? That's not Dustin Poirier's fault. That's Eddie Alvarez's fault for not paying attention. On Madden and the NBA games, they have that awareness stat.
Yeah.
This is an awareness stat. I don't get it.
Okay. I can buy the argument that Eddie was rocked because he was rocked. Okay. Mm-hmm. But there are still rules. You have to follow the rules whether you're rocked or not. You break the rules, you get disqualified. Or you get a warning, point taken away, or you get disqualified. Very, very simple. Okay? That was another option Herb Dean could have did. He could have stopped it, taken away a point. Poirier couldn't continue. You could go to the scorecards if you need to, or you disqualify Eddie Alvarez. There were some options there for him. Okay, in terms of Dustin Poirier, you made a good point, Sean. If I'm in that position, I know I'm not getting kneed. There's no way I'm getting kneed because I'm protected by the rules. Here I'm protected by the rules. If I'm on my back, that my opponent takes me down or we're in a scramble, I end up on my back and he gets side control or he's trying to transition to a north-south position, I'm 100% confident I am not getting knee to the skull. I'm not getting knee to the skull. Not from there. You can't knee me from there. All of a sudden, these knees start coming down on me. I am not defending myself because I had no idea these are coming down. I'm not fighting in Japan. I'm not fighting in Pride. where these are allowed. I'm fighting in North America in a cage. I'm not expecting to get kneed in the skull where my neck can compress or my head can compress into my shoulders, compressing my neck, causing a lot of damage. Okay? If that happens, hey man, those are the rules. Whether you're half knocked out or not, illegal. Disqualification. Because a fighter who has been training mixed martial arts with the unified rules of MMA is not prepared to be hit in that manner. Simple.
Imagine if, like, you could just get away with something. What if Conor McGregor said, well, my sunglasses were on. I couldn't really tell who I was throwing that can of Monster Energy at. I thought I was throwing it in a trash can. Would they have bought that?
Nope.
Eddie Alvarez knew what he was doing. And if he didn't know what he was doing in the first knee, he sure as hell knew what he was doing the second knee, where there was no mistaking that Poirier was down because he dropped. Unforgivable.
Okay, I wouldn't say that, but yeah. And listen, Eddie Alvarez, for those that don't know, class dude, just a great guy in that moment. You know, I have a theory in my life. You never judge somebody by their behavior. You judge them by their personality. You talk to them about their behavior. You got a problem with their personality, they're out of your life. Eddie behavior. Eddie Alvarez made a mistake. Doesn't mean he's a bad guy. I want that to know. I think Dustin Poirier did a fantastic job telling the crowd to just chill. Don't boo this guy. He's a former champ. Good guy.
Well, now you have a Fox or an FS1 main event this fall if you want it.
Bingo. I love it. So I'm trying to remember at the post-fight press conference, did Dana White say, yeah, they're going to put it back on?
I don't know, and it's so funny the way that Poirier acted afterwards, and now he's like, I want my money and I want a rematch. I'm like, well, the best time to state your case for that is to state it in the cage with millions of people watching, not in an interview where thousands will read it.
And that's what I've said to a lot of fighters many, many times. Not just that situation with Dustin Poirier, in general. There's a fighter competing this weekend for another organization that used to compete in the UFC that happens to be Canadian. What say you there, Alex Trebek?
Sorry, what was that? I was a little confused there.
There is a fighter competing this weekend who used to be in the UFC, now competes for another organization, is
Rory.
Canadian. I spoke to this gentleman on numerous occasions about the importance of the various levels of media interaction and the importance of when to take advantage of certain times. There is no better time than when Joe Rogan is interviewing post-fight.
Yeah.
Number one. Because everybody is watching at that point. Number two, get it out at the post-fight press conference. Because the post-fight press conference may not have as many viewers as the UFC is live, but all the media are there. So now whatever you say or do will get out to a variety of streams of media. Number three was the TV show that you're on with me across the country that got picked up on some outlets south of the border, or not south of the border, online. So there's power in media. Know when to use it. That microphone, Joe Rogan, is the most important time to get your message across. Okay? And I would always think clearly, you don't have much time. You've got, 15 seconds, 10 seconds per answer if you're lucky. Okay? Opportune time if you're a fighter to get your voice out there. Okay? Conor McGregor took advantage of it. Conor McGregor takes advantage of any time a camera or microphone's in his face. A lot of these fighters don't. So you got a guy like Dustin Poirier, like you said, that was when he should have did it. Now, I can flip the argument and say, well, he was a bit rocked. Took a couple knees to the face. Wasn't exactly thinking coherently. Was in a fight. I get that. Wasn't thinking straight enough to speak. But yeah, you're right. That was the opportune time for him to make that statement. Afterwards now, maybe not so much.
Yeah, you gotta do it too. And also, I want people to stop calling out Conor McGregor all the time unless you have a legitimate claim. Stop, especially when you're there with Conor McGregor, because as we found out, he does not care to end your career with a couple of words. He'll do that. Stay in your lane, but have ambitious but realistic goals. The thing is, Rory, I haven't seen a lot of media from this, like out of this show, and it's basically a one-fight show now because MVP fell off. That sucks. But I mean, Czech Congo versus Sakai, I think, will be pretty good.
Are you really surprised?
But here's the thing. I usually always get a thing from Bellator saying, hey, these guys are available for media interviews, and I didn't get one last week. I'm like, well, okay. And I'm not seeing anything from anybody else this week, having talked to these people. So I'm like, damn, I wasn't the only one. You got McGeary and Linton Vassell. I can tell you from experience, McGeary can be a tough one to conjure some answers out of, to conjure a response or a quote out of. And I'm not one of those guys that says, talk about this, talk about that. You frame it in a question, you hopefully get an answer. It's a bummer because Rory was a big signing for them, and it's a fart in the wind right now.
It's crazy, man. It's crazy.
We've got a loaded weekend at Fightful. We've got Invicta, no buzz. Bellator, no buzz, but the show is a decent-looking show. Kimbo Slice Jr. is on the show. Baby Slice, whatever the hell you want to call him. Who was a fantastic interview, by the way. An incredible interview. So
was his dad.
Hey, he's even a better interview than his dad, and that's saying a lot. That's saying a lot.
Sean, when I first interviewed Kimbo Slice, UFC Fan Expo, I think it was their first Fan Expo, when he was part of that Ultimate Fighter cast, the UFC had obviously the biggest booth there. That's a given, like just for the UFC and stuff like that. We had to go up the stairs, and they had this like VIP thing on the top where you could oversee all the way around the expo. And I think it was Schaller or someone said, "Hey man, Kimbo Slice, you want him?" Yeah. So I'm sitting there, and we were talking, me and my associate producer, and we're like, okay, or at the time was the executive producer. He's like, dude, are you ready for Kimbo? Like, we don't know what to go with here. I said, dude, he's a man. He's a regular human being. Just because you saw those videos on YouTube, he's still a regular dude. He's not going to fight me because I'm asking him questions. I can guarantee you that. I don't think he's a douche. And I remember going up there, and he was just like, I know you. And he came, he shook my hand, and we're talking, blah, blah. And I said, yeah. He goes, aren't we supposed to be doing an interview? I'm like, whenever you're ready, man. Right? And the UFC's like, dude, you only got 2 questions. And Kimbo's like, no. Give the man his due. Guy puts in a lot of hard work. And I'm like, I like this guy. We literally sat down, and the interview I had with him, Sean, and everyone watching and listening in right now, was one of the best I've ever had. Nick and Nate Diaz are some of the best guys I've ever interviewed ever. But this guy here, I saw a side of Kimbo Slice and got information before and after that interview that blew my mind away. Absolutely blew my mind away, because what you see on YouTube, or what you saw on YouTube, and what you saw on the show, and what you saw everything else, the different guy. Completely different guy. Very humble. Very great humble. Dude. It was a great guy. And so I see where Baby Slice gets it from.
Yeah, and to be honest, he didn't make many mistakes that somebody in their first pro fight wouldn't make, who had one amateur fight. He looked fine. You learn, you grow. I think he's a more skilled fighter than his dad was already. Now he doesn't have the big power and all that stuff, but I think he's going to be just fine. If he decides to stick with this as a career, he's going to be just fine. And he's a very smart dude. Very, very smart. So I was surprised Bellator didn't really make much of an effort this time, and we're seeing the same thing with NXT and Backlash this weekend on WWE. We got 4 events we're covering this weekend, including New Japan coverage super early tomorrow morning, guys, for wrestling fans. But we've got Bellator 179 Friday, we have NXT TakeOver and Invicta on Saturday, WWE Backlash on Sunday. Not a lot of buzz. You got to create a buzz. You got to do something. Make people think, I got to tune into this.
I just feel like I should have recorded all that stuff I did with Jim Ross and Chael Sonnen when we did that Battleground show. That's what he talked about, man. Make some noise. Now, if I could do that Oklahoma accent, I would do it, but I can't. The way he told that one fighter, I'm trying to remember who it was. It's what puts cheese on your Whopper. I was like,
oh, wow.
Me and Chael looked at each other and we're like, okay, it's the greatest thing we ever heard. He just sat there and literally, Jim Ross is Jim Ross. He's a larger-than-life personality, as humble as he is. I don't remember if he had the hat on or not, but he just kind of did one of these, Sean. He took his, just leaned over onto the table and just looked the fighter in the eye and just began to preach. And me and Chael were just kind of like, we're listening, right? It's Jim Ross talking, but we're looking at it like you knew you were in a moment, right? Yeah. And this young kid is basically being educated by a guy that, if I'm not mistaken, brought us Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, Ric Flair, arguably one of the biggest names to just find these people, if I'm not mistaken. You can correct me if I'm wrong if I'm there. But he began and just to just preach to this kid, and it makes some noise, son.
Well, he didn't necessarily find them. He found Brock Lesnar and Batista and Shelton Benjamin and Randy Orton and a lot of those guys. That was more his era, but when he talks, you listen. He's got the driest sense of humor too. It's
it was great. Just fat, but the way he explained it to these guys, and the fighters were just kind of like awestruck. Yeah. And then he finally says, "It's what puts cheese. You got to make some noise, and it's what puts cheese on your Whopper. You like your Whoppers with cheese?" We're just Jill and I are like, "This is the greatest ever. This is the greatest thing ever." And another cool thing about that Battleground show was, how much more. I've been to Oklahoma, but how much more Oklahoma or awesome could it be in Oklahoma to be in a pickup truck with Jim Ross telling you WWE stories.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I heard stuff about Ric Flair that I would never repeat to anyone listening right now, unless you're a male over the age of like 25. It's just like Ric Flair was the man with the ladies. I'm not saying anything else.
How about the balls on GSP, by the way, saying that
I don't get it, man.
He's not that interested in fighting Anderson Silva? Ya boy!
Don't put me on the spot, man. Don't put me on the spot.
What's up with that? That's weird.
Don't put me on the spot. Yeah, he's I should find out more from George, shouldn't I? See what's going on here. I will endeavor to see what's going on. What else, man? What else do you want to talk about?
I know that GSP's got some balls on him for that one. How about that?
It doesn't make you happy, I can tell.
No, I think it's going to be 4 years by the time he fights. He was gifted a title shot, a weight division he's never competed in.
Do you think of the conspiracy theory that this is his way of getting back at the UFC or getting back at Dana White for screwing him a few different times and talking shit about him after the Johnny Hendricks fight and stuff like that?
I don't think he's that malicious.
Neither do I, but you never know, right? Like, it doesn't make sense to me for him to say, because him and I spoke off the record. We spoke and we talked, and it's like he wanted that Bisping fight. He was ready for that Bisping fight in December. He wanted to fight Bisping in December. He showed up at the Gentleman's Expo in November, still in shape, because it's not too late. I wanted it in Toronto. It could still happen. And then, he showed up to the press conference, did whatever he had to do, but there's something else going on, man. I'd like to find out.
He'll be 36 in a couple days, and that fight would probably sell 1 million pay-per-views. He and Anderson Silva.
Yeah.
I think it still sells 1 million.
From a Canadian perspective, everybody that no longer watches the UFC would get wind of that. That's in Canada. That's the Manny Pacquiao-Floyd Mayweather fight, right?
Yeah.
That's what it is in Canada. That's exactly what it is. So everybody would come out of the woodworks and all of a sudden become UFC fans again. So yeah, you're right. I think so. That'd be a huge, huge buy.
Did you see that Lorenzo Fertitta expressed his anger to Dana White about the Poirier Alvarez finish? And still you can tell that even though I think the Fertittas own a negligible percentage still. They retain a tiny, tiny bit, I think. Because I think they always want to own a little bit of it. Dana White still takes very seriously what Lorenzo Fertitta says.
Yeah. Yeah. It's that was always an interesting relationship, man. When Dana said that at the post-fight press conference, I thought it was pretty damn cool. Only because the very last show that we did, the reason why I know this, I would never have remembered this, is I was editing some video yesterday, and I pulled up my very last show because I needed footage of me at Sportsnet. And it's video that I'm doing. And I just scanned through the footage, and I'm like, oh my God, Lorenzo. That's when I sat down with Lorenzo. That's when I sat down with Dana. That was at the UFC head office. That was in Lorenzo's office. And I was just kind of like, I remember vividly the relationship that Dana and Lorenzo had from day one when I first met them years and years and years ago, how it never really changed. They're completely different people. Lorenzo's that businessman will walk into a meeting, suit and tie, blah, blah, blah. Dana's that brash guy, the figurehead person, hot-headed. Lorenzo, I've never seen him upset. I've never seen him hot-headed. And if he ever got upset, it would be strategic. He reminded me of an agent that I used to have that used to represent me. Huge here in Canada, I guess pretty big internationally. But his nickname was the Velvet Hammer.
The Velvet Hammer?
Right? He's just, everything is just nice and smooth. Everything is cool. It's soft. But man, if that thing comes down, you're done. Yeah. You're screwed. whoever's getting negotiated, this guy did a lot for me. He was so good. And when I talked to one of the big on-air personalities here on the sports stations who actually said, yeah, you need to sign with him, blah blah. He's like, never forget the Velvet Hammer. And then when I told him after the negotiations what he did for me, he's like,
I think that's the best way to run or to negotiate, to be in any position of power, because if you're like that all the time, people don't want to work for you, they don't want to work with you. But if you're like that, or when it comes down to it, it shows people that you care enough about either what you're doing or who you're representing or what you're trying to achieve. I think that's a very good way to go about it. I had a lot of people asking me, Joe, about the Joanna Jędrzejczyk walking out of the presser thing. And one person saying, should Ariel Helwani have even asked that? Yeah, he should have. It's his job as a journalist to ask that. And she obviously didn't hold any ill will. She was on the MMA Hour Monday. And she understands the media's role. She's very smart in that regard as well. More than a Tito Ortiz was, who would hold something over somebody for like 10 years in that manner. So I don't see anything wrong with him asking. It was about one of her coaches leaving American Top Team, and I'm sure you'll probably talk to a couple people about that this weekend. And we'll have that next week. But it was a coach that was a big reason why she moved and helped her with her wrestling. And she pointed at her last fight and said, did you see what happened in my last fight? That's why.
Yeah. Listen, nothing wrong with Ariel asking that question at all. It was a legit question. I've never been always that guy that wanted some answers to every question. There were some questions I'm like, you know what? I'm not asking that. I don't have to ask that. Why? Because Ariel's right there. John Morgan's over there. Kevin Ioli's over there. They can ask that question. I know the questions that I want for my show that none of them need, that are probably going to be better than whatever they ask. So there was always a mutual respect amongst all of us as to who was going to ask what question at what time. Even if it was never spoken, Sean, you just knew. Leave that one for Damon Martin. Leave that one for John Morgan. That's an Ariel one. This is what I'll take care of with Dana, and blah, 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 blah.
I'm taking them all. Screw them. Fightful for life.
That's it. Gotcha. But yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that question. But you get that reaction. I mean, I've had fighters cry in front of me before during interviews. You want a fighter to cry? Ask a question about their family. Ask a question about their kids. Ask a question about the suffering it takes to be a fighter when you're away from your kids as the kids are growing up. You watch that fighter get emotional. Two former light heavyweight champions broke down in front of me. So it's not easy for some of the fighters to answer some of those questions. So Ariel asked, listen, he just wanted to know what was going on, and it affected Johanna. She walked off to the stage crying, and, it is what it is. You have to ask those questions. You don't mean to make the fighter emotional, but, sometimes it happens.
You talk about tear-inducing things. I almost cried when I saw Valerie Letourneau saying that she thought she was going to die during her last weight cut. Now, the California State Athletic Commission has passed a package of weight cutting regulations, which just happened, I think, as we went on the air.
I got to read that.
The weight divisions like 165, 175, 195, 225 being added and encouraged. Dana White, it seemed like the UFC was on board, but Dana White says, well, we didn't say that. We didn't say all of that. Now, what that would do, Joe, is that would eliminate 170. You just wouldn't have that. You would have a division added there. You'd have 195 added and 225 added. To me, I don't care about an extra division above light heavyweight. I really don't. I'm sure that there are a group of people, because if you do institute that division, heavyweight will be a lot of fat guys. It will be. Because a lot of those guys are going to drop to 225 and they'll fight there. And so not necessarily on board with that division. Maybe that's one they could adopt. 175, all for. 195, not totally against it, because that 20-pound difference is a hell of a gap, Joe.
Huge. 185 to 205 is massive. Rich Franklin's coming out of retirement. Vanderlei Silva will be in the UFC. Chael Sonnen. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
there are a lot of guys that could do that. Rashad Evans ain't going to be fighting at 185 if that's the case.
Yeah, I like these weight divisions. I've always liked the 10-pound difference. Always have. I've brought it up before. The wheels of the government, I was told, are always square. So what are you gonna do?
Yeah,
takes time. Now it's happening. So in that document that you read, or that story you read, I'm checking my inbox. I don't see anything in mine right now. Clearly, you are much cooler than me. Did California send you that?
No, somebody else did.
Okay, good, because I'm on the California list, so I don't know how you got it, but I'm sure I'll get something later on. But sorry, you said it was more weight division related. Anything else?
I haven't got the chance to read it all. I've been on this show, but
holy smokes, come on,
But
man.
the UFC, Bellator, and Invicta all did support the decision, apparently.
Okay.
And wrote letters supporting it.
Okay, well, there you go. Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing that.
Here's some more information. Actually, I just found an article that Mark Raimondi wrote about it. He is fantastic with commission-related stuff. So this gives me a little more information than the email I got. Under the 10-point plan, fighters who miss weight will be fined 20% of all bonuses, including win bonuses. The full bonus fine will go to the opponent who made weight. The 20% fine of the show money, half to the opponent, half to the commission, will remain. Repeat weight miss offenders will be recommended to go up to the next weight class. A fight day weight check will be implemented to see how much fighters gain back between the weigh-ins and the fight. If a fighter gains back more than 10% of their body weight, the fighter will be recommended to move up to the weight class for his or her next bout.
Changes are happening.
I think that is phenomenal. I think that's good because you won't have fights pulled the next day. They'll just say, hey, next time you need to move up. And it'll be recommended. It won't be mandated. It'll be recommended. Good stuff. Also, I encourage you guys, because I haven't been off of the podcast to assign it, but yeah, he does some great work about commission-related stuff. Mark Raimondi, he's one of the best in the business at that. But changes are coming, and it is good. I like it.
These are good changes. These are very good changes. I agree with them. I like them. I don't know about the 20% going to the commission for administrative purposes, but we'll see if Trigg defends that. What do you think? Because he's licensed. He's a ref under California. He's going to defend it.
Yeah, he probably will.
On camera, he'll defend it. I'll see if I can get him.
That schmoozer.
Oh, he's the king of schmoozing. Trigg is the king of
guy.
schmoozing. People say, I've got a gregarious personality. Nah. He walks into a room and it's like, I'm on my own, bro. I'll catch up with you in an hour. See you in a bit.
Adam Ball has a good question. What happens if they adopt a weight class and abolish another? Does the champion just lose his spot, or does he become champion of that new division? What I would do, because 170 is the one that's going to go, I would say, Tyron Woodley, you can carry your belt to the cage for your next fight. Your next fight will either be at 165 or 175, your choice, and it is a championship fight. That's a simple way to do it. You have your choice because you achieved that peak, that pinnacle. And because of that, we're rewarding you with this. I understand if it's an issue, throw them a little extra money, do the right thing, but 165 and 175 are absolutely...
Well, that right now, that'd be perfect for him because Damian Maia fought at 185. Tyron's a big dude. He gets to save 5 pounds during that weight cut. Damian Maia would be more than happy to fight at 175.
Oh, yeah.
Perfect
and
I'm
looking, lightweight has 90 fighters. Welterweight has 90 fighters. Middleweight has 52. Light heavyweight has 43. So that 195 is going to really dilute something. The 175 is going to help dilute. Middleweight's going to take a hit. It's going to take a big hit because it's going to have people going up and people going down. 170, I don't think will be affected that much. I mean, you'll have a lot of 155 and 170s going down, but there's so many of them. But there's 52 middleweights, 90 welterweights, so that not as big of a hit there. But I hope it goes through, and I hope they institute the divisions. You know what? About 5 years ago, I would have said no, too many divisions. Nah, I'm good. If you're going to run this many cards, you could stand to have a couple more divisions, as long as it doesn't become every 5 pounds. That's where I draw the line.
That's boxing. No thanks. Yeah. Now you're getting to the craziness. No, I like 10 pounds, man. 10 pounds to me has always been perfectly fine.
Let's wrap this up, Joe. This has went smoothly. We've given the people a supersized show, as we will be every week here on Wednesdays in the future. I want to tell everybody, register at Fightful.com. I do members-only podcasts on occasion. And we have our forums up and running. Wrestling, MMA, boxing, TV, movies, video games, action figures. We want you to make the forums like a home away from home for everything. Everybody watching this show, head over to Fightful.com. Start a new topic right now. If you don't, I'm going to say mean things about your mothers. And I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it wearing the most ridiculous shit you've ever seen at a press conference. How about that one? Also, visit Fightful.com. I know a lot of you just come and check out the podcast. Visit Fightful.com. Let people know about Fightful.com. Joe always encourages you to let one person know. It helps a lot if you all say, hey, we heard this on the Fightful podcast. We heard this. Because all the time, me and Joe are dropping news on here that hasn't been released, and I do that on the wrestling side as well.
Yeah, listen, it's been synonymous with my career. Didn't matter where I was, where I worked. I would drop certain nuggets, or I would say certain things, and lo and behold, a week or two later, it would show up on other sites or on other TV shows, or.
Well, you're gonna start breaking that shit right here.
That's it. Yeah, I got lots of stories, and I talked to a lot of people. So, the Fightful podcast, the Holy Smokes podcast.
Guilty is charged with the stories.
Yeah, I've got lots. I haven't even scratched the surface of the amount of stuff that I've seen, done, gotten in trouble with, and just it is what it is. I look at some of the guys that have been doing, other sports for 50 years, and I'm like, you can start in your 20s, you're 70 right now. I can just imagine. Oh yeah, this one time in Las Vegas, and I'm like, yeah, I'm listening. You got my attention. So yeah, I feel like I'm getting there. I'm halfway there, I guess. So
Adam Ball says Trig is awesome. I definitely missed that show. We will have segments from Trig moving forward on the show. He's in the Philippines right now. So leave us a thumbs up, subscribe, iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube. That stuff helps too. Turn on your notifications. I didn't used to encourage you guys to do that because we had so many podcasts that could get a little annoying every twice a day, a notification going off. But it's much more manageable now. So check us out.
Yeah, guys, don't forget, and make sure you follow Sean Ross Sapp at Sean Ross Sapp, and yours truly at Showdown Joe on social media. I will be leaving for Florida tomorrow. Titan FC 44. I got my notes halfway done, Sean, so I'm excited. But Titan FC 44, I will be calling the show play-by-play alongside Kamaru Usman, the best grappler in the welterweight division, I believe he calls himself. Kamaru recently had a birthday. I want to get his thoughts on the whole Damian Maia thing. So Kamaru Usman, myself, we're hosting Titan FC 44 on Fight Pass this Friday. Make sure you tune in. I'll give you lots of updates while I'm in Florida, so make sure you guys do follow me on social media. I have a goal for the show here to get at least 1 hour at the pool. For the very first time I've worked for Titan, to get 1 hour. Just 1 hour at the pool.
You want to get tan like this. You can't see how tan I am. As soon as that sun beams down, boy, I get dark. It's wonderful.
You're just a horrible human being.
It's wonderful. If any of you are in the Northern Kentucky area, I'll be at NXT Thursday night. Me and my wife are going to go check out the NXT show in Highland Heights. Come say hi to me.
That's a wrap, my friend. You can close it off. Go ahead.
Guys, until next time, we're out.